God is good and all the time. Amen. For the first time in our country's history, at least for the first time since they've been tracking it, we have fallen below the majority line for people who gather to worship on Sundays as a church. So Gallup poll just recently released their information that now, although 70% of Americans claim they believe in God, only 47%, this is the first time, only 47% say, I regularly attend worship. What's startling about that is it's down 20% just from the turn of the century. 1999, 2000, we were at 67% of Americans who gathered together in a house of worship to worship God. And so we're seeing a drifting away from a spiritual commitment to gather together towards a more secular America, and it's going fast. So for 70 years, give or take, America was steady at right about 70% of Americans gathered together. And just in the last 21 years, we've lost 20%. So I think that evangelism was always a timely topic. But I think maybe it's time we as churches in America rethink what evangelism really is and what it's like. Like I said, evangelism was always a timely topic, but for most people, the idea of sharing the good news of Jesus is either very mysterious, like it happens in a black box and we don't really know all the process that goes on, or if it's not too mysterious, people are intimidated by it. Ooh, I've got to share my news, the good news that I have about Jesus, with someone else, a stranger, a coworker, a friend, a family member. What if I say the wrong words? What if I this? What if I hope before we're done today that I can demystify the idea of sharing the good news, and I hope to remove the most common, largest obstacle that most people are afraid of when it comes to evangelism. The biggest rejection to sharing the good news that I hear from people throughout the years. So I want to share with you what I'm going to call our 3 L's. And I believe that these 3 L's will help anyone, regardless of your depth of biblical knowledge, regardless of your skill level, regardless of your perceived abilities. I believe that this will help anyone share the good news of Jesus. In my time in ministry, I've baptized well over 100 people, which in the big picture, that's not a big number when you think about spending that much time in ministry. But what I have noticed in sharing the good news and baptizing people is that in one way or all way, these 3 L's are in play. They take place, and one way or another, they come out. So let me start with the first L. And I'm going to go back in time to where before I was a believer. Tammy and I, we started attending at the Naperville Church of Christ, right outside Chicagoland. And the minister there at the time, his name was Gary Lambrick. And he was a former construction worker, and before he got into ministry, there were several points of contact that we had. But with my time with Gary, I found that he did some counseling with me. We studied some Bible. I had some crazy questions. I didn't know who Jesus was. You know, I was like, is he a God? Is he a man? Is he an angel? I just had all kinds of crazy things I didn't know about. We went out for lunch quite a bit. We spent time together. But what I learned from that experience, because it helped guide me to become a Christian, is that Gary listened. That's the first L, listening. You've heard the old saying, people don't care how much you know, right? They want to know how much you care. In other words, it doesn't matter what you know, and this is the big obstacle, right? Most people who are afraid of evangelizing say, what if I don't have the right answers? What if I don't know? Evangelism is less about you to have all the intelligence than it is to listen. People want to know that you care. The number one way that we can show someone that we care, that we're interested, is just to listen to their story. To just sit down and ask a couple of questions. What's your background? Tell me about this, tell me about that. And let them take over. People don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. They want to know that you care about them. And so the very first part of evangelism is just listening to someone. Don't be afraid that you have to have all the answers, because you don't. You want to listen. That's the first one. I'll tell you story number 2. I became a believer, and at the time, Tammy had yet to be converted. And so we were attending church, and actually I had even started preaching on the weekends, and she had yet to come around, right? Well, there was a family, Duke and Charlotte Givens. They had the type of house where you don't put up a Christmas tree. You put up 3 or 4 Christmas trees, okay? Big house. He was an executive with, I think, Exxon or Standard Oil or something. I don't know. She did like real estate or something. Super awesome couple. And Tammy was pregnant with Jacob. Now, we've got Drew, Zach, Jacob, and Clay. Jacob's number 3. Our own families were not interested in having a baby shower for baby number 3. But the Givens were. And their hospitality, probably a small gift in the big picture for them, reaped eternal awards. Tammy came out of that experience and she felt very loved. They loved on her when our own families were like, it's the 3rd kid. You don't need a baby shower, Loving other people, acts of kindness, doing something that communicates to that person is probably more powerful than if you had the Bible memorized and you could just quote any book, chapter, or verse. You're wanting to share the good news. Someone is lost. Apart from Jesus, they're going to hell. You're concerned about their soul. You want to share the good news. Remember, you don't have to have all the answers. You listen to them. Listen to their story. Love them, right? You're communicating the greatest part of the gospel, right? God so loved the world, right? So what happens when you add listening to someone, listening to their story, and then loving on them? You get the 3rd L. And that's where we all come together, living out our faith. Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 13, Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out at its feet." So even back in Greco-Roman times, they had different grades of salt, right? Table salt, salt that preserved their food, and salt that was no good, they did throw down. Just like we salt the roads here when it snows every 6 years here, right? They put salt down to dry up the roads and make them more accessible and traveling. Verse 14, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. I saw on a church marquee, and it says, what type of vitamins do Christians need? B1. Be a Christian, right? What does the world need to see? They need to see us living out our faith. That's what the world needs to see from us. Did you notice Jesus says you are the light? He doesn't say one day you'll have enough biblical information, one day you'll teach enough Sunday school classes, one day you'll grow up and you'll be the salt. You know, one day you're going to be the light. Who's he talking to? A bunch of seminary graduates? No. Poor people. People on the fringes. People on the outskirts. People that the rest of the world doesn't really consider much. You're the salt. You give flavor. You replenish what's depleted. You preserve the world. You're the salt. You're the light. Right? Light gives us guidance. Light allows us to experience life. How fast does light travel? Is light the fastest thing that travels in the universe? It's not. You said nothing travels faster than the speed of light. That's not true. Do you know what travels at the same exact equal speed of light? It has to be. Otherwise, light wouldn't be light. And that's darkness. When you turn off the light, darkness fills the void at the same exact time. I know it's a little early in the morning. We haven't all had our Starbucks. Darkness travels as fast as light. It has to be for physics to work out. Darkness travels as fast as light. And I think most people, spiritual or not, would say that right now we are in dark times. Right? So just keep that in mind. You are the light, but darkness travels fast. Jesus says a city on a hill cannot be hidden. In ancient times, why did they choose to build cities on top of hills? Military defense. It's easier to see your attackers coming and to be prepared. It's easier to defend because they have, quote unquote, an uphill battle, right? Jesus says you are a city. You're the city on the hill. You have a great defense, right? No weapon formed against us shall stand, right? Right? He will give us renewed strength, right? We mount up like wings on eagles, right? We are protected. We are the city on the hill. We don't have, see, everyone thinks, I've got to defend, I've got to protect, I've got to come up with all of these things that protect the gospel against the animosity of the world. Jesus says, no, you're a fortified city. And everyone can see a city that's set on a hill. You're light. Don't put it under a basket, right? This little light of mine, right? Not going to blow it out, right? Jesus says, you are. You are the salt. You are the light. You are the city. Identity matters. How you see yourself. Tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, Mike Mason is not going to get up and get ready for school. Do you see yourself as a teacher? No. You see yourself as a retired man, right? How you see yourself matters. Kellen probably isn't going to rush into a fiery building because he's got a handgun on. He could be a fireman one day if he wanted to, but he doesn't see himself as a fireman right now. His brother's a fireman, but he sees himself as a police officer. So don't speed down Stone Drive, right? How you see yourself matters. If you see yourself as part of the family, you want to protect the family name when you grow up. You don't want to embarrass aunts, uncles, grandparents, right? How you see yourself matters. Jesus says, you are the salt. You are the light. You are the city. This is who you are. And when it comes to evangelism, we have something to offer that the rest of the world doesn't. We have a different perspective on how we see humanity, how we see ourselves, how we see our origins, where we come from, and where we go when we die. But it's not just how we see the world, it's how we see ourselves. And that's why identity matters. There's no substitute for prayer and preparation when it comes to evangelizing, to sharing the good news. Those are necessary, prayer and preparation, but they're insufficient. How you see yourself, that comes to the top. If Jesus says already that you are the salt, you are the light, you are the city, who are we to argue with that? We need to stop seeing ourselves as unable. We need to stop seeing ourselves as incapable. We need to stop seeing ourselves as less than what we are. Not because I say so. Not because someone else important may say so. But because Jesus, He clearly says, you are the salt. You are the light. So evangelism truly is about the small things, right? Jesus uses everyday things. Salt, a lamp, a city. It's the everyday things that, by the way, without we couldn't have life, right? Can't go long without salt. Don't eat too much, but you can't go long without it, right? I believe evangelism is simpler and a lot less complicated. I really believe it comes down to listening to people's stories, expressing your love, and living out your faith. If you can listen to someone's story, you're way ahead of most people we know. No one really has time for other people. You can love them and be a little less self-centered, you're way ahead of most people. And if you can live out your faith, then we're doing great. Listening to them, loving them, leading by example. If you can do that, not only can you evangelize, but you are.